where our mission is to be a catalyst for social change, empowering people in high crime areas to overcome poverty and crime. And we do that through 4 different pillars: prevention, intervention, retention, and recovery. And so we have different programs for each one of those areas. One of the things that we believe is that every person has infinite value. And so we try to operate with that thought in mind. And so when you're talking about mentoring, it's important to understand that piece, regardless to where and how that person um, is different from you. And lastly, I'll share that I went to the one and only Christmas Addicts High School. So I know IPS is, has tech and all of these other schools, but the one and only
I
Christmas
knew that
Addicts.
was coming. I knew that was coming. I've known you long enough to know that was going to happen. So thanks, Anthony. Way to represent. All right, Mr. Johnson.
Okay. I'm Adam Johnson. I'm the Pathways to Purpose Manager for Elevate Indianapolis, also a teacher mentor at George Washington and Arsenal Technical High Schools. My Pathways to Purpose program gives students opportunities and access to business professionals, career coaching, colleges, and universities, and creates a pathway to connect said students with those opportunities for post-secondary success. I was born an East Sider, born and raised East Side. I did 2 years at John Marshall High School, and then I graduated with doing my last 2 years at Arlington High School. I'm a board member for Lutheran Child and Family Services, which is a treatment facility for at-risk youth. And I'm also a board member for Grit into Grace, which is a program that provides resources for women who have been or are currently being sexually exploited. So I'm very happy to be here as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Johnson. Anthony, as you were sharing, and we'll kind of come down to our next, but that students of great worth, our number one value for Elevate Indianapolis, I'm just reading it off the script here. We believe every child is of great worth and has a desire and potential to succeed. So for us, that's just very core to our being, is how we see our kids and in dignity and equitable ways. But thanks for sharing that. I got some IPS grads here. I'll let you two arm wrestle it out to which high school is the best, but we'll do that later. We won't bother our attendees with this. So for our guests, we're going to set the stage for a little bit here, and I'm going to ask each of the panelists to answer one of these questions. So panelists, as I share these, you can kind of think of one of the questions that comes to mind, which one you want to answer. And these are kind of short answers to kind of lay the context for why we're having this discussion as far as you see it. And then we'll go from there. So first question to consider is, what is it like being an urban youth in Indianapolis today? So kind of 2020, this season right now, or what's the struggle and how deep is it? So it can be, if you have a kind of a positive framing in that first question, just what's it like being a general student today in the city? Or a second question is maybe if there's a struggle you see and how deep is it? And again, as much connection as you can make to the neighborhoods that you've served in, that you've kind of been around. I think that's real helpful for our panelists to get some context for you. Again, it's just kind of a setup question, so we'll keep it short to keep moving, but I want our panelists to kind of see some of your framework, how you see things. So Anthony, I'm gonna lean on you first, and then we'll kind of work our way around here, if that's all right.
It's been both good and challenging. The good is we still have youth that just have not given up, and they've learned how to fight through and be resilient and overcome the obstacles that they deal with in their communities and remain positive. But then we have the other side of youth and families that have pretty much given up. They've lived in a before this pandemic, they lived in a pandemic, for most of their lives. And so that's been the good and the bad. So hopefully that gives you a framework of what we're dealing with in some of the neighborhoods that we've been working in.
Thanks, Anthony. Deandra, can I kick it over to you next?
Absolutely.
Stand out.
I'm so glad Mr. Beverly went first, though. When you read the question, the first thing that came to mind was tough. 2020 has been tough for a lot of youth, emotionally, mentally. They have experienced, like Mr. Beverly said, the pandemic, but we have seen a heightened increase in violence. Just this week, I've talked to several parents who have lost children and grandchildren over the last 30 days. I can't believe how much my phone rings in the event of, after a homicide of one of the kids in the city. So it's been tough, but I always like to shine a positive light however I can. And through a lot of the social unrest that our country and our city has seen, we've seen a lot of resilience. We've seen a lot of our youth being able to channel some of that energy and some of that toughness into a positive light. So I think that's been really good to see how some of them have been so receptive to a lot of pain. So we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly thus far.
Jeff, you want to jump in, and then Adam will close with you.
Well, I'm going to say that the goodest thing is that our children will be returning to school. And so we'll have an opportunity to wrap our arms around them a little bit more with some services once they return to school, because we know where they are. The next thing, I think we're forgetting a group of people who can really help us have an impact when we're dealing with some of the issues, especially some of the anger and accountability that we don't have from youth. I think men and women returning home from this community that have been just as involved can have a huge impact with some of the things, especially with the anger, because they can express to those young brothers or sisters who are angry about certain things that are going on, where that anger could lead you, and maybe deal with some of the hostility that the young folks are dealing with, as opposed to doing it how they've been doing it. As Ms. Yates said, her phone has been jumping off the hook with the last 30 days. And so it would be my hope that we can somehow engage those folks and not so much ostracize them, but engage them on how they can help us in the neighborhood, because that's where they're going back to, and that's what the people trust. And so hopefully those things can happen real soon.
The responses I've gotten from my students, my high school students, has been, they've said exhausting, frustrating, discouraging is what they've been telling me. We had a specific discussion about this as far as how they view their lives in 2020. And they express seemingly a never-ending cycle of suppression, feeling like their voice is not heard. That these youth, they're not able to readily identify the advancements that have been made in society today. And because of that, oftentimes they're left in a state of hopelessness, in my opinion, and from their words as well, because they've concluded if what has taken place in the past to bring about change isn't working, why should I try? And I feel that's where we failed this particular generation in fully and properly educating the youth of the changes that have taken place over the last so many years. But that's the voice of many of the youth that I have been working with.
Thanks, Adam. We're going to jump into the next one. Before I do talk about kind of our sitting environment, I'm going to have a couple of panelists to share only. But if you're an attendee, one of the things we're going to be able to do at the end here, hopefully we have some time to do, if questions come to mind as you hear these discussions, please drop those in the chat box, whether you're via Facebook or whether you're here on the Zoom webinar. Feel free to drop those in. We'll flag a couple of those that stand out, and we'll kind of lob them over to the panelists and kind of put them on the hot seat to answer some of your questions here at the end. But next, then I'm going to kind of lean back to Anthony and Adam, I think, for this one. these couple of questions, as you think about what has changed the past 20, 30, 40 years, just kind of think from, you got 2020, go back 1 decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, over as you've seen kind of working with youth specifically living in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods. What's changed? If anything has changed, if you don't see or you do, what are the observations you've made kind of culturally about young people that are living in the communities that we serve from your time at it? Anthony, I'll lean to you first and back down to Adam.
I'll pick up where Adam left off at. He said that, gave all of those places where youth were feeling frustrated and so on and so forth. And so what I'll say is what has changed is family structure. Family structure has changed tremendously. You know, as a kid, I didn't know that we were poor. I didn't have to worry about it.
Right.
You know, but today we have youth that work full-time jobs and go to school. I didn't have to do that. When I worked a summer job, it was for the summer so I can buy a pair of tennis shoes or whatever I want, you know, but that has changed. I'll share this. I grew up off of Indiana Avenue on Baker Street, and there was nothing in the neighborhood that we didn't have. My grandfather owned the block of the 800, pretty much half the block of 800 Street, 800 block of Baker Street. And all of our family members lived on that block. So whatever our household didn't have, we can get it from one of the other households. We did not have to go out of the community. And so again, I never knew how poor we were until I got grown and started hearing the stories from my parents of how they had to struggle and do all of those things. But today, our youth are feeling the same pressures that parents feel, in some cases even more, to the point where we have 17-year-olds that are running out here doing some of this crime to get money to get in the household. You know, so family structure has changed. But what has caused those family structures to change? I don't know if you want to go there or not, but there's a lot of policy and things that are in place that has impacted. There's a lot of values that have impacted, a lot of policies that impact the people's values. And policy changes people's way of thinking and how things are should be done, you know, and so that would be my short answer.
Adam, you got a short answer on this one as well?
I do, Aaron, because I feel a lot has changed, both for the good and bad, depending upon how far we go back. One of the biggest changes I think that's taken place, which has been a negative, is the wealth gap, which I think has caused a greater disparity in the resources available to our youth in these neighborhoods. Because as that gap is widened, and it's simple, the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and hence the resources available to them, whether it be via taxes or entitlements, whatever the case may be, just aren't there. But at the same time, though, even as I was saying before, how times have changed and the young people not seeing the advancements we've made. And back a few years ago, it would have been unfathomable for me to, or anyone to think we would have had a Black president. You know, a few years ago, it was a death wish to look at a Caucasian male in his eyes, face to face, you know, or even when we were wearing signs that said, "I am a man." You know, these are things that have changed for the better, and we've made progress. But at the same time, there have been areas of setback, and in many instances, it's no longer, it's not as easily identifiable the way these injustices are now carried out in practice. So things have changed, but maybe that's more so of a shift of they're more hidden and not as obvious, to us, or specifically to the youth as well. But I agree with the youth is still feeling the pressure. Many of my youth are working. Many of them are at home now in school, babysitting while doing virtual classes. I have several students babysitting their siblings and cousins while in class. So there's a lot that can be done, but I think there's a lot that has been accomplished, and where we go from there, I think, is what something we'll tap into further in the discussion here.
That's great. We're going to jump right into the next layer of questions here. I think we have a great context set. Hopefully, our attendees are kind of have the stage set, for them. Let's move into, and Anthony gave the light answer. Policy started to get into it, but I think definitely we may need to come back around to that, Anthony, in some of these questions as you see fit, of course. But looking into kind of Band-Aid solutions versus permanent solutions. So what is, the temporary versus what we think is long-term? And obviously, and so for Elevate this year, I'll say this is that we've done a lot of relief work this year. So we have kids that don't have access to food at home. So we're delivering food because that's a temporary solution, but they have to eat that week or that night or that weekend or whatever, right? So that's not a negative, that's a need, but that's not a permanent solution, is waiting on one of our Elevate staff to deliver, food or provide some economic assistance that we've done thanks to partners. And so just as that might be a minor example, kind of some low-hanging fruit, but we'll get into these questions. I'll grab a couple of you for each one, and we'll just kind of see where they go. Over the years, we've seen a lot of money thrown at these challenges. Programs kind of come and go, and obviously you all have seen things come and go, as well, or come and stay, and maybe you're not sure if it's really a solution, but it's been kind of commonly accepted. We've seen some of that. I've certainly seen some of that in the last decade, as well. But what are elements essential for permanent solutions, both for systemic change and interpersonal immediate impact? So maybe not specifically naming a change as much as what elements do you see have to be present for a permanent solution around some of the challenges and problems that you have seen and or see today, both again, systemic, which Anthony started to allude to, a policy, but then also interpersonal immediate impact. So maybe it's not a systemic policy change, but there's immediate interpersonal impact kind of for that life-on-life relationship. So is that question clear enough for our panelists? You want to kind of give me a thumbs up if you feel like that makes sense? And then I'm going to go over Deandra, and I'll lean on you first for that. So is there some elements that you kind of have a sense that these are the kind of things that need to be present for us to formulate, to lead out, to execute permanent, lasting solutions for challenges?
I think a couple of things. Consistency. A lot, like you said, money's been thrown at programs and things like that, but we need consistency, and we need relationship building. It's one thing for you to give me $100 to, donate to my program, but what about partnership and relation building to create sustainability and to create consistency in these? I guess I'm trying to say when things are like grant funded, and we maybe have groups from certain sectors of income wanting to place a Band-Aid on urban or inner city issues, but that's it. It's beyond just writing a check. Yes, we need money, but we need relationship building. And a lot of times when money has just been thrown in our community and they're not coming and taking a look and seeing what's really going on, it's hard for us to create that sustainability and consistency. So I think those are some things that we need. Is just solid relationship building. If you're going to be here for the long haul, not when it's a news story, not when, things are on the highlight or it's trending on social media, but be here when we need you, which is all the time, so it's just that trust. And I think when we build consistency, we're building trust, and we're being a part of restoring hope And we just have to know that, yes, we need money, money, we need that for sustainability. But we also need that trust and consistency so that we can build proper relationships and we can grow properly, with one another instead of just slapping a Band-Aid on it. It just won't work. And thus is why we are here where we are now on this cycle that the kids said that they feel like on, because people keep slapping Band-Aids on systemic racism issues. They're slapping Band-Aids on violence issues and not getting to the root of the problem.
Aaron, could I build upon what Deandra just said?
Of course.
Thank you. Not to push Jeff out any, but one thing that came to mind as she was saying that was curiosity. I think is vital to this movement and to us advancing, because there has to be a curiosity from all parties in the city, in the neighborhoods, in the nation, a curiosity of what's really going on with Black American males and females, with our youth. And that curiosity will bring about change, because you can't be curious without eventually, to some extent or degree, if you're genuine in it, without developing a compassion for what's going on. And through that, I think change will be evoked, both policy as well as programs and the like. And I think there's been more I've been asked more about what it's like being Black in America this year than all my previous years combined. And I think
Right.
that is something that we can build upon and take advantage of in this particular season, this year in 2020, and bring about and evoke change for our youth, for sure.
That's good.
That one would probably merit an entirely separate webinar on its own, but but great words. Jeff, you want to jump in here? What do you think? What elements have to be present for permanent solutions? Got both of them led into some things. Anything you would either amen to second or add in something different on that?
Certainly, both are certainly correct. And sitting from someone who has been part of the violence reduction, I'm going to agree with Ms. Yates. Man, no one organization can meet every need of an individual that walks through their doors. But we give monies to organizations thinking that that's what's going to happen. And so developing those partnerships and relationships to say, hey, I can take this person so far, but I want to hand him off to you now. And then the next thing, we got to get away from all this red tape. I send somebody to you, they got to fill out tons of papers just to get some services. Come on, man. These people are hurting right now. They need this stuff immediately. And so when people walk through your door, we need to be ready to greet them or have a partnership to send them where they need to be. And thus the dollars will be more effective, and we won't just pour money into one organization thinking they're going to meet the need of that neighborhood or serve whatever they're going through.
That's good.
All right, Anthony, I'm going to close this one out with you. I think obviously I know already our attendees have heard some solid layout here on what's got to be present. What would you land us with on how do we move towards permanent solutions for everybody's own different advocacy, whether it's their professional life, individual, et cetera?
Deandra talked about relationships, I think that is really key. I think the other thing is, you heard the 8-year-old last night ask a question about every time I turn on the news, that's all I see is negative, 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 negative. But then you want me as a child to do what you say do. And I can't remember the question in full, but basically it was like, you want me to do these things, but then look at you on the news and you're just bashing each other. You're just downing each other. And so that's the same thing I think Jeff was talking about even here when it comes to grants and those grant cycles and organizations working together, but also people outside of those organizations, which I believe is what Deandra was talking about. How do we bring these things together and remove a lot of the restrictions so that organizations can do what needs to be done. That's a challenge. But again, it comes down to relationships where organizations that are doing the work probably should be the ones writing the the guidelines for receiving the dollars, and then helping, other organizations who have a heart and a passion to do it and bringing them along. So how do we build those type of coalitions to do what needs to be done? Because, every time you apply for one grant, there's so many restrictions. And then by the time you get a matching grant to take care of the other needs, like Jeff was talking about, that grant cycle has ended, so you go back and forth. So we need people that can come on board to help fill a lot of those gaps. But again, it comes down to those relationships. And then again, some of the policies and things that are in place that hinder us.
Great way to land. And that's been, I echo that experience too, Anthony, over the years of, sometimes the frustration is those of us kind of in the trenches, kind of doing the work, not having a real adequate voice on how to shape funding, how to shape process for funding. We spend so much time chasing funding and filling out paperwork to do funding, sometimes just to get a no, and actually not sometimes, 75% of the time, frankly,
Right.
to get a no from sometimes my questionable is people making the decisions. I'm quite often certain don't have enough voices at the table that are people that are actually doing the work. And whatever, color, culture, context, all of that, even just aside for a second, people doing the work, being a part of evaluating the processes. So we're not caught up in boardrooms endlessly or office endlessly, but we can actually shape the work based on the voices that we hear from students. And, that to me is critical. And I think I want to hear, make sure all our panelists hear loud and clear from everyone that shared. This is our mission statement for us, but all of us echo it in our own different way. We think the best solution is long-term, life-changing relationships. Ultimately, it's relationships, equitable, dignifying, lasting relationships. And all of you said that in your own way, based on your own experience. You'd think we'd had a conversation before this, which we didn't. so it's great. But that's, yes, sir.
And if I could jump in to piggyback on what you said about spending so much time trying to find grants and work on those. And what happens is that sometimes, man, when we have programs, we're not really meeting the needs of the people, we're meeting the needs of that grant.
Yeah.
Because we want to look like we're getting dollars to show people or to bring in other dollars. So we're getting grants. And so the grants that we're getting may not meet the need of the individual, but because we need those dollars to function, they chase the grant instead of the actual need of the individual.
Facts. And some of that too, Jeff, is that if you're not chasing it, you're not in the conversations, your brand isn't in the conversations for other conversations, and so when Anthony and I met a decade ago almost, or close to it, I was more a front line come doing what he is. And I realized I need to be able to be back supporting Mr. Johnson's and all our other team doing this work. But the reality is we have to spend so much time in an operational capacity chasing those conversations on grants that maybe we think are frankly poorly written and poorly executed. But if we're not in the conversation, we may not be able to get one that actually is centered on the right thing. So it's this, I hustle more in the office than I do in the streets, now, but that's you have to be able to last. And you guys all know that, but I think enough ramble on that. I'm going to land and we're going to make this a quick kind of 1 minute answer so we can stay on time here. But you all hit it. I think it's a great thing. And I want our panelists, or I want our attendees to really hear this. What are you hearing from this generation? So specifically kind of filter your own thoughts through things you've heard verbalized by your students are what they believe they need or want, whether it be spoken via the arts, could be music, painting, or just literally in dialogue conversations with you and whatever whether it's church context, whether it's neighborhood or school context, or you've had them involved in committees or, various ways to hear their voices, because I know that's a passion of all of you that are in this panel, which goes back to everything we just said is we've got to make sure that the solutions are actually, are actually scratching an itch that we think our students, our young people of today, now they're not by themselves experts, but they're certainly part of the conversation of forming the expertise. What do we think are lasting solutions? So again, we'll keep this one a little tighter time-wise to keep us on track here, but any of you want to volunteer kind of, hey, here's what I've heard, and I know I want our attendees to hear.
I will.
I'll jump in really,
Oh,
ladies first.
Yes,
Oh.
ma'am.
Go ahead.
Okay, just real quick, two things came to mind. Modeling behavior. So like when the 8-year-old was talking about, what he sees when he turns on the TV. I mentored two young ladies very closely, and I took them out for dinner one day, and they said, we want people to show us what they are saying they want us to be. You guys are saying these things, but then things are being done differently, especially on social media. So they want to see that modeling behavior, whatever it is, whether it's for a certain profession that they have, or being a mom or dad, they want to see that model behavior. And the second one was, I think I forgot my train of thought, but the one thing I was thinking was, just the model behavior, and in that it builds a trust factor. And the kids want to see hope. They want to have hope. They want to have a sense of what hope looks like. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more down the line, but that's something else. And one more key thing, I probably got about 15 seconds. Mental health. They want us to listen to them. One of my mentees shared with me that she told her parents she was depressed. And her mom was like, what do you have to be depressed about? You don't have to pay bills. But kids deal with so much. I would not even want to be a 17 or 18-year-old in 2020 because of all that they have to deal with. So they just want us to listen. They want us to listen.
Yeah, that ditto to what Deandra just said. I mean, that's exactly where I was gonna go. It's hard to even get to some of these other things that you mentioned, Aaron, the arts and all of these other things, because bottom line, many of the youth want a caring adult, like Deandra was saying, to show that they care. They want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk about they want to be seen, they want to be, I go back to, I forget the name of the murder that took place, but it was Trapezzano murder that took place.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, just a real quick, short piece, but this guy was jogging on 16th Street in Hallville area. He gets murdered by a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, whatever the age was. And so that piece happens. But I'm at home and I am taking pictures of my niece, who's my goddaughter, and she's just smiling and cheesing, and I'm telling her how beautiful she is. And all of a sudden the news comes on, and it's the kid that was arrested for that murder. And when he walks in that jail down that hallway going to his court date, he's holding his head down. And you could see the anger and frustration or whatever he was showing on his face. The minute the camera hit his face, what did he do? He raised up his head and he put a big smile on his face. And in that moment, I said, he wants attention.
Mm.
And I was so glad that I recorded it, because I played it over and over, and I looked at what I was doing with my baby, my niece, was my goddaughter. And I was like, man, this dude just really want attention. And there's some other things that I dug up after it and researched it and everything, and found out that this kid had been moved and adopted, moved to Texas. He's been passed around family to family member and all of that. And then that night he does that. So again, going back to Deandra's point, our youth want a caring adult that cares and that can model what we've been saying that they need to do.
I'm going to have one more of you share for time, then we're going to jump into our next question. Does Adam or Jeff, any one of you want to take a jump on this one? What are you hearing from youth specifically?
Me and Adam, I'm just going to take a real quick example. After the killing of George Floyd, there was a young man on social media that said, "I just want to live." And that's what these kids want to do, man. They just want to live. And we have to figure out how to help them live in hope instead of fear.
Right.
And so if he gave me like 45 seconds, I feel like I'm on the debate from last night. You know, like just give me my 45 seconds back. Youth I've spoken to said they want to be able to scream without being judged. They want to be able to express their feelings and their emotions without being medicated to subdue it. They want to be able to make change and express themselves in a manner that people will see them without them being ridiculed or ostracized and the like. And I think mentoring, and I think Ms. Yates hit the nail right on the head, as did everyone else. To me, mentoring is the linchpin in all of that. Because when I'm mentoring these young men and young ladies, I'm doing exactly that. I'm modeling what oftentimes their parents aren't able to, because the parents are trying to make ends meet. They're trying to get bills paid. Or they just been in a state of flux their entire life. And these young students, these young males and females, they don't have anyone in their lives to really model what it's like to be successful. What is me taking a young man to go get shoes and a shirt and a haircut for his job interview? Who's doing that for them? Who's showing them how to interview? I'm doing that. You are doing that. We need more individuals doing that. And I think that's key. How to answer the questions, how to say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes or no, sir. How to make sure you clip your nails, make sure you're dressed appropriately and properly prepared for interviews. And that list goes on and on and on and on. Modeling is huge. And through mentoring, which is what, I've done virtually my whole life. And what I love to do, I'm able to do that. And they're able to see what it's like to be successful, the struggle it takes to be successful. You know, because oftentimes this microwave society, they want it instantaneously. And that's not what it's about. I was homeless my junior year in high school, so I can't empathize and relate to what many of them going through. Lights off, bills not being paid, you know, being evicted every other year. I can understand and relate, and therefore they can see me and others like me modeling what they can become, and it gives them a vision.
And Aaron, I just want to say this really, really quickly. And we also have to understand there's a difference between mentoring, life coaching, and counseling. I just want to throw that in there. We could talk about it later if we have time, but there's a difference.
Yeah, good word. I'm going to land on a couple of you for this one, for what gives you hope. I'm just going to ask a couple of you. So specifically, when you think of this generation of 14 to 24-year-olds, what gives you hope?
I'll take 30 seconds with that.
Okay.
These young people give me hope. One of the young men I mentored, John, we were driving, we just gotten some food, and we're stopped at a stoplight. He takes his bag of food, throws it out the door, opens the door, my door to my truck, throws it on the ground in the street. I stopped the vehicle, put it in park. I was at a light. I put it in park and said, "John, get that bag." He's like, "Are you for real?" It's like, "Yes, I'm for real." He's like, "But it's already outside running. It's just trash." I had to, I made him get it, first of all. Because I told him, we can sit here all day and night until you get it. He got it, got back in the vehicle. But then I explained to him the mentality that was associated with the act that he just did. Afterwards, we had a further discussion. This young man, this was the summer. He still calls me, we still stay in touch. He calls me Pops. Why? Because I'm stretching him and loving him at the same time. He gives me hope that change can be made in our youth through various venues, various access points, but change can take place. They are willing to change, but we have to have the the strength, the wherewithal, the patience to work with them for that change to take place. It takes time and it takes work, but the youth themselves give me hope, because the more you work with them, the more you'll see and hear what their heart and desire is. It's just slow to come at times.
Great story. And he's a great kid too. That's a great teaching moment. One more person want to share what kind of just gives you hope in general of this generation, and then we'll move ahead and start to land out. I do have a couple of questions that have come across, so I want to make sure we save our last 7 or 8 minutes or so for questions.
Well, what gives me hope is the fact that God has given each and every one of us the ability to overcome any adverse situation in our lives. And every person has the capability to understand their past and see the change for the future. We just have to help, draw that out of them. And that's what life coaching is drawing out what God has already deposited.
There's a lot in there. Let's make some room for a couple of these questions. There's some great questions that come through, some weighty ones. And so these would merit webinars. They probably fill volumes of books already, but I'm going to soft lob these out to you all, knowing that I'm not a panelist. I'm going to go ahead and throw them out to you all and see if a couple of you want to take a stab at a couple of these, and we see where it goes. I'm going to grab this one maybe a little lighter, maybe not. Do you think that generational assessment and inclusion will help to cause change for our youth? We have hurt, broken adults attempting to raise children and grandchildren. I'll read that question again just to let it soak. Do you think that generational assessment and inclusion will help to cause change for our youth? Challenging question. And I've got another 2 generational question as well, but I'll let this one go first and then we'll come back around. Anybody want to take a stab at that? Your thoughts of that?
I'll share because I do life coaching through Inner Beauty with parents. And they're typically parents who have had kids taken from them through DCS or, various situations. And I think absolutely there's so much time spent mentoring children, and there should be, but we can't forget about the parents who are the covering of these children. And so I think absolutely we need to take generational assessments, and maybe when we're out here mentoring kids, see what kind of help the parents need, what kind of guidance they need. A lot of them are products of what they see. One of the young ladies that I mentor, she shared something with me about her mom's work history. Mom had one job in her entire life. She's 19 years old. She worked for a span of a few weeks, and that's all she's ever experienced, was seeing her mom work for a few weeks of her whole, childhood. And so we don't want that to be some sort of rippling effect from generation to her daughters, daughters, and so forth. So I think it's imperative that we take those assessments, but when we're taking those assessments, don't treat them as accusations, but let them be teachable moments to the entire family, the children and the adults. Allow that to be teachable assessments and not accusations on, you could have did this better, you should have did this better, you shouldn't have went to jail, you shouldn't have did this. But in all of that, find a positive spin on it so we can be supportive, and in that support, building those type of relationships in hopes that there's some kind of generational change, generational curses being broken.
It's a great answer. I'm going to jump into the next question and give a chance to soak as well. So this is in regards to education/skills training as it relates to economic growth and opportunity. What would make for a successful two-gen approach? Specifically, what do parents need and what do kids need? So kind of similar to this, people are asking around kind of multi-generation, seeing the issues of youth and adults around education, skills, or think about economic growth, opportunity, things to wait to overcome economic history challenges. What in your mind has to be present for parents and also for kids, for students, young people, need. Anybody want to jump on that one and share, a couple of you maybe, and just your own thoughts off the cuff?
Yeah, it sounds like the last question and this question you asked really go together, because the first one, the assessment, allows that healing to take place that's needed so you can have those conversations that Ms. Dycus just talked about. And so that's the healing process. But also to the second part of the question, it takes time. So you're talking about generational connections and those kind of things with the 2Gen approach, rather. Look, our youth are running circles around me on these social media platforms and all of that kind of stuff. And, so I need time to learn that. So if we go back to an adult who haven't hit all of their developmental points growing up, who are hurt, they need time. So we go to school, we go to college for 4 years before we get a degree. We need to be able to invest 4 years, 5 years into a family's life versus a 6-month program or a year program. We need to be able to invest 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, so that's the best way I can answer that.
Great, Anthony. One of you else want to take this multi-generational, 2-generational approach to education, economic development? What comes to mind as you think about this?
Like anything else, things transfer. And so if you have trauma in your life, if you have things that have caused you to not be successful, whether it be school, that transfers to your kids. And so we have to work with the whole family, man. We just can't, because a kid acts out in school and he's with us every day, that we're just going to deal with that. We have to find out how they're hurting and why they're hurting. And so until we begin to work hand in hand, bringing the parent in, even though the parent may be a little aggressive or whatever the case may be, we still have to stay the course. And I guess the bottom line is, in order for us to really make a change there, we have to stay the course despite how they may dip, how they may act, what they may say, how they mistreat us. We still have to stay the course in order for this to work. Because if I want to make a drug dealer stop selling drugs on that corner, I just can't go one time and he calls me all sorts of names and I don't go back. I got to go back over and over and over and over. And at some point, he's going to say, all right, bro, why you keep coming back? And then that gives me an opportunity to say, aha. And so we're going to do that. That's what we got to keep going over and over and over.
Great. I think one of the things I'll land for Elevate, I'll have one last question, then we'll wrap up here as we're getting close to our time. But, one of the things that our team has done, Mr. Johnson has done this endlessly the last 6 months, and all our other staff we're obviously, our program is youth oriented. We don't offer programming for parents, but our team engages parents and families endlessly. And so we do house visits for new students. So with new students now, we go to their houses, on the porches, having conversations, just making sure they know who we're working with. And the last 6 months, we have times 10 the amount of parent engagement we've had versus prior years altogether, because it's created so much opportunity to engage families, even though we're a youth program. But we know, as everything you all have shared, that without those parent relationships, our influence sometimes can be futile or at least temporary versus being able to press into the home. And that's been, and they're relational. They're not programmatic. I mean, it's not a come to this thing from 6 to 7:30 to do this. It's intentionally making the phone calls for the house visits, and it's programmed into our program calendar, but it's not a program for the parents. Sometimes we overcomplicate it, like we've got to offer some 3 steps program. And as much as just we need to press in, and it really buys a lot of goodwill back with our kids as well. The kids that we serve specifically know that we're pressing into the family, not just them. And that creates a lot of incredible mentoring conversations with our students. So real proud of that. I'll land with this last one. We'll take one person to answer it. This was from the Indianapolis Dyslexia Center. one of the issues that our youth are facing is an education, especially that is labeled as learning disorders. What is labeled as learning disorders? Is there an awareness regarding dyslexia and its impact our African-American youth? Thanks. Is there an awareness regarding dyslexia and its impact as you see it from your experience, obviously? Do you see awareness to it? Have you seen that as an issue pressing and its impact on specifically our African-American youth? Any thoughts around that anybody want to land on?
Well, it's very clear that probably 45% of our Black youth are labeled or have IEPs. And so in those IEPs, certainly we hope that would be in there, that's an issue that they have. And so if it isn't, there's a disservice being done through that IEP that they're not meeting that needs. And so I don't know any other way to test a kid but to request from the school to do it. And from there, they will let you know. But certainly the only thing that I would know, parents don't come and tell you that. The only way an educator would know is that he or she has had some experience with it, or it's in the IEP to let you know that that's the challenge that a student has.
Jeff, we're gonna land with that. Thanks for taking a stab at that. We're up on our time. First, I want to thank each of our panelists. So in our classroom, we praise somebody, we snap it up. So hey, if you're an attendee on here, go ahead and snap it up for our panelists. And it's how we show appreciation and thankfulness. But then also, and equally as important, is our partner and our sponsor for this thing, Sharpen, that made all this possible. So thanks to Sharpen and just their human-centered approach, which very much echoes our passion for life-on-life mentoring and long-term systemic processes. So thanks everybody for being on, our attendees. I know people are starting to fall off here already, but we'll conclude this, and then panelists stick on for 2 more minutes and we'll wrap up as well. But thanks for making a great event, great discussion for everybody possible. So thank you.